Jason's Log, Halloween, October 31st, 8 p.m. I'm about to go trick-or-treating with Dad and Uncle Doomsvince. He's not here yet, so I don't know what costume he's wearing. I hope he doesn't do what he did last year. He just wore a plaid shirt and a hat and said he was being Vince. I thought he actually was Vince, and he just forgot to wear a costume until the 4th or 5th house, when he made a little girl cry by saying he wouldn't run her over with his Doomsmobile if she gave him all her candy. I think he was joking. I can never tell with him. He was really confused, too. He said if nobody ever does the trick part of trick-or-treat, kids should just treat when they walk up to houses. I don't know what's so special about the Doomsmobile anyway. It's just a 2001 Ford Taurus. Dad was going to be Adam West Batman, but he changed costumes at the last minute. He's in the living room right now trying to breathe out of that helmet. He's this really scary-looking version of Azrael Batman. It's cool-looking, but I have no idea where he got it, or why he took off a lighter costume that's easy to see and breathe out of. Maybe it just came in the mail or something, I don't know. Candy I hope I get. Reese's Cups, M&M's, Sour Patch Kids, or honestly, just Reese's Cups. If I came back with 49 Reese's Cups, I'd be pretty happy. Or if it was the kind that comes with 2, that'd be like 98 Reese's Cups, which is even better. I'm being Robin this year, as you can see. My brother Freddy is Tiny Adam West, which feels weird. Spawn Year was like a million years ago. I go back and watch it all the time. I watched it every day of last year. It was awesome. The show, not the comics, obviously. It's the best thing Dad ever made. It's strange watching it because I have memories of the parts I'm in now, but not actual memories of doing it. I guess I was in a trash can and wore a Doomsvince costume, but I don't remember it. And now Freddy is the age I was when I did all that. Where does the time go? I was excited about being Robin, but now I don't know. Dad's not a regular Batman anymore, and Azrael doesn't have a Robin, so it doesn't really work now. It'll still be fun, I guess, but I don't know. I want to be Batman and Robin, not Jean-Luc Valley and Robin, or whatever the heck his name is. Kind of feels like some imposter took over.
Jason, let's go. It's trick-or-treat time.
I have to go. I'll tell you how trick-or-treating goes. Or just treating, I guess. Bye.
Okay, I just rushed through 4 issues, and I'm really hoping that there's not anything else in the next 2 days that is this lengthy, but at least, just like last hour, just like Vengeance of Bane, this is pretty decent material. This time, I'm going to be taking a look, of course, at Sword of Azrael, which was written by Denny O'Neil with art by, of all people, Joe Quesada. Some really good artwork, some of the best I think I've seen from Quesada. This was really interesting to go back to. I haven't read any of this since I was a kid, and I don't think I had really read all of it before, but I kind of feel like I'm getting deja vu from Spawn Year through a whole lot of this book, and I imagine there'll be some of that here and there throughout this journey because it is that time period and it is being a dark vigilante book with some anti-hero stuff. Some of those tropes are bound to be there, but I'm reminded of the day during Spawn Year that I looked at the first Spawn Batman crossover, which of course was ultimately really disappointing, as much fun as some of the artwork was, and this is like the reverse of that. This feels a lot like reading a Spawn comic if, you know, the story was coherent and the characters were proactive and at least, interesting enough. And if you had an anti-hero who you kind of cared about, what happened to him, and found him kind of sympathetic. So that's good. I guess my only real consolation for having to do this 48-hour, mad dash to read and talk about all of Knightfall is that, again, the material doesn't totally suck, at least so far. So let's go ahead and get into this. The first issue is oversized, about 10 pages longer than your average comic book. This is Vanishing Angels and Sudden Death, a 2-for-1 special. So right away, Azrael wants you for his army, and this is going to turn out to be Jean-Paul Valley's father, who's going to, spoiler alert, get killed in this opening scene. He's being hunted by this guy named Laha, who is going to turn out to be an enemy of the Order of Saint Dumas. This is a guy who is part of this order and decides to turn on the whole order, and the entire order is like 12 or 13 guys. It's like the size of the Knights of the Round Table is all it is. And it dates back to the 14th to 15th century, and as far as anybody knows, there is no Order of Saint Dumas anymore. It is this secret underground kind of cult that nobody knows about, and it is the book is really vague about what they do now. They see themselves as really righteous, and they believe that they're doing the work of the Lord, but they're a lot more interested, it seems, in whatever they think the will of Saint Dumas is than they are in the capital G God. So Azrael puts up a valiant fight. You notice that this is pretty bloody and violent for a DC comic. Right away, it looks a lot like an Image thing. I think the panel layouts are also very Spawn-like. This looks pretty influenced by that book, and I think that is plausible. I think that this would have come out only a year or two after Spawn started. Azrael falls out of an apartment in the middle of a big town festival. That news anchor on the left there is going to die in the scene. Bruce Wayne will say, well, I really liked her. She was great. I don't know if she shows up in an earlier book. I don't know what kind of relationship he had with her, or if he just saw her on TV a couple times and thought she was a great news anchor. This book has a lot of really dynamic action and really great cinematic panel layouts. Azrael's son, Jean-Paul Valley, is going to walk in on him in his apartment and realize that he's dying. His son gives him a cryptic instruction, and he's going to have to go train or discover, I guess, that he already has been trained because he's a sleeper agent and doesn't realize it, as the next Azrael in the Order of Saint Dumas. So this goes back generations and generations, and every valley has been, I guess all the males down the line have been an Azrael, and we'll find out here in a little bit what Azrael is. So we have immediately kind of a parallel to Batman, where Jean-Paul Valley has lost his father. His father is very influential in his life philosophy and who he ends up becoming and what his purpose in life is, just as is true with all three of these guys. So Bane, I should say, is not mentioned, of course, anywhere in this book, but when you read these in order of publication, although I'm not sure which one of these came first, but the reading order that that Riddler radiator face guy gave me was Vengeance of Bane first, and then this, so they're around the same time. But these things inform Knightfall so much that it's hard not to read them as part of that grander story. So of course I'm thinking about both Bane and Batman throughout this, and how they are all thematically related. And so Bane is the only one of these guys that never met his father, and so his lack of a father figure very much factors into his ideology and worldview. Batman actually, of course, had his father's influence up to a certain age, and this kid did too, but doesn't realize that he is, of the three, actually the most influenced by his father, because he was actually hypnotized by his dad to give him all of the training that Bruce Wayne actually had to do a lot of work to go through intentionally, and that Bane did as well. Now, Bruce is going to immediately go into detective mode. This is very much a detective story for Batman. The first thing that he notices in investigating the murder of Jean-Paul Valley, or excuse me, of Jean-Paul Valley's father, is that he was shot in a bunch of places that should have killed him, but somehow managed to survive. Jean-Paul Valley is going to have to go out into the mountains, and he's going to meet this very creepy troll-looking guy that doesn't look human at all. He is fully, his name is, Nomaz. He is a man of total blind faith, and he can come up with an excuse for any heinous, horrible crime he wants to commit or thinks that Jean-Paul Valley should commit in the name of this really ambiguous order. He immediately has this guy start beating up on Jean-Paul Valley so that he can activate his programming. And then we get this great page of Batman just investigating, and this is, I think, my favorite art in the book, just for Batman doing Batman stuff. This is the only place where Batman's really on his own turf. Once he gets out into the mountains, he's going to be kind of out of his element, and he doesn't do my favorite Batman thing, which is the when he's investigating, the flashlight in the mouth thing. But I think Kasana draws him not too far away from what Breyfogle tends to do with him. I like Breyfogle's cape more, but he does have that big flowing jagged cape, which is great, and he's constantly making cool shapes out of it as he is jumping around. I love Batman in silhouette. This is very much my Batman. Then we cut back to the stuff with Nomaz, and he's explaining that Jean-Paul Valley was programmed as a child, that everything he needs to know, he actually intrinsically knows, even though he doesn't realize it. And at some point, when he becomes Azrael later, he's going to have Spawn-like amnesia for no real clear reason. He doesn't have that right now, but he's going to have it for a minute, and then he's going to break out of it at the end, which is confusing and kind of random, and it seems to be there for thematic reasons before it's there for story reasons. Batman here pretty soon is going to go out into the mountains. He has discovered the sigil of the Order of Saint Dumas at about the same time as Nomaz is explaining the sigil to Jean-Paul Valley, and using that, he activates his conditioning, and we get this really cool, creepy, kind of surreal page where he's falling into the kind of hellish mindscape of Azrael. And so now, in his mind, he has kind of transformed into that. And then we get this, he doesn't like straight up turn into Azrael yet, but now it's been activated. And again, even though that programming has been activated, he still at this point seems to know who he is, or if he doesn't care, it doesn't bother him, he doesn't talk about it yet. Then we start getting some of the more stilted and dated dialogue in the book, and I think that there is a decent amount of that in this. That is one of the weakest parts about it, and I'll get to the weakest thing about it here in a second, but you get this hilarious great line at the bottom of this page where Jean-Paul Valley says, "So I've become a tough guy?" And then Nomaz says, "No, not yet, because you have the skills and the knowledge, but your body is soft and flabby." But not any softer or flabbier than Laha, who will be the villain for this piece, who is basically if Jason Wynn was in Batman instead of Spawn, and if he kind of turned into Malbolgia, sort of, instead of turning into Anti-Spawn or Redeemer, which is more what Azrael is, I think. So let me get into my biggest issue with this book, which is the way exposition tends to be handled. In nearly every one of these issues, you've got some really forced exposition where somebody is explaining something to someone else that they pretty much know already. I don't know why this book couldn't have been handled with more just internal monologue. For some reason, Denny O'Neil seemed to want to have someone like actually in scene explaining things to you, especially if you're whenever we're dealing with like out of order sequences. So whenever he goes non-linear, and he does that a little bit later, he likes to have some character just explaining to someone else what is happening. I don't need it all to come from one perspective. I don't have a problem with POV shifts in a thing like this, but I just don't understand why you need these really clunky explanations. And then we've got Oracle here for just a minute. She's not going to factor majorly into this book, but she's helping Batman to do some of his investigating. So it's kind of nice invoking at least a member of the Bat family for a minute to give you the sense, again, in comparing these three characters, that you have, each of them has their lifelines and their supporting cast. With Bane, you've got his henchmen, and with Batman, you've got Alfred and sometimes a Robin and sometimes Oracle and characters like that. And with Azrael, at least for the moment, you have this Nomaz guy, but eventually he's going to be very much a complete lone wolf. And all three of them are that way to a degree, but Azrael will become a guy who doesn't lean on anybody, which will, of course, really get him into trouble. I don't know if this is on purpose, but I kind of like the idea of, and I may be reading way into this, but in introducing Azrael, who will eventually be the guy who takes over the mantle for Batman after he gets his back broken, very early we see Oracle, and we even mention the incident with the Joker that made her crippled, and Batman is going to have to deal with something similar not too long from now. We're about to get Bruce and Alfred into the mountains. Their helicopter is going to get shot down by Laha, who blows it up for no reason. Then he's got a big giant gun, and he's decided that his god wants him to blow up a helicopter. And that is the end of book 1. Now we get into book 2. Again, some even really bloody covers, and for the early 90s, it would have seemed really graphic to have things like this at DC. It's like they're working really hard to get adults to buy their books, to say that these things are not just for children, and to kind of compete with the guys at Image and maybe even Dark Horse. So we get the kind of the mantra of Azrael as the title for this issue. Azrael does not protect, and that is sort of like the Borg tagline, like everything is irrelevant or resistance is futile. Like that is going to be Nomaz's answer to everything for Azrael. Azrael only kills. Azrael only does vengeance. He does not protect. Like nothing else matters. So we get the helicopter crash at the beginning of this, and pretty soon we're going to kind of flashback and explain what happened with Laha. But before that, Bruce and Alfred are upside down trying to decide how they're going to handle things. They end up putting on some snowshoes, and they conveniently find a cabin close by where they're able to recuperate. And of course that cabin is going to be Nomaz's, because he and Azrael, he and Jean-Paul are already there, and Nomaz plans to blow up that cabin for no reason other than Azrael does not protect. We don't trust really anybody. Later on, we're also going to get the other tagline, which is nobody's innocent, and he is maybe totally paranoid, or maybe just a crazy person that likes excuses to kill people. There really is not much of a difference, it will turn out, between Nomaz and our villain in this, Laha. So this is really confusing, by the way. Right at the bottom, at first I thought that was Bruce Wayne, and I was like, why does it look like he has a big gash on him? And like, there's no kind of transition, because it feels like, you know, all of this is in one scene, and then all of a sudden at the bottom we cut in the middle to what looks like Bruce Wayne in his glasses, and then suddenly this other guy with this gash, and it will turn out that that's actually Laha and his henchperson in their helicopter. And I don't know why we need to cut to them right then. I would have waited until we got to the scene where we're actually dealing with them. So the monologue this time not internal, but talking to his henchmen, is from Laha, explaining to Laha everything he has seen already, but catching us all up to speed. Now, I guess Laha can't really be writing, like if he was making a journal or something, in hindsight, because spoiler alert, he's gonna get killed at the end of this, but I think this could have been handled in a less clunky way. I don't really understand what the point is of some of the non-linear in this book. I don't know why we have to backtrack on this. We really could have just intercut back and forth. We've already met Laha at the beginning of this, so I don't think there's any good reason that we couldn't have just done the whole thing chronologically. And so anyway, we get this hilarious moment after he thinks he sees his Lord Biss, who is the enemy of Saint Dumas. I guess Saint Dumas has his own demon that he apparently goes up against, and the difference between Dumas and Biss is one is a self-proclaimed demon, and the other one is supposed to be a good guy who has angels that do vengeance. So again, all of this is extremely ambiguous. I don't know what the substance of any of the teachings of this stuff was supposed to be, and that's not a criticism. I think the idea is that if there was any substance, it was lost over time. But now it's not about anything. Now it's about just excuses to try to gain power or to revert to our baser instincts. So anyway, he sees Biss in the mountain, and then we get this great moment where his henchman says, "Hey, why are you telling me all this? Like, I was standing right here. I already know all that." He says, "Well, perhaps I'm not speaking to you. Perhaps I am speaking to my Lord Biss, whose face is on the side of a mountain in silhouette. I guess like the trees just cast a shadow that remind him of his Lord Biss." I mean, this guy is absolutely insane. I don't know why you didn't see this Biss guy before. Like, I don't know why, like, in this helicopter, in that moment, that's when he decides he's had this vision. But the answer to everything this guy does is he's completely out to lunch and out of his gourd. And don't ask too many questions, because we're not going to tell you, like, how exactly he got like this. I would have liked a little bit of that. I would have liked a little bit more of the history of Saint Dumas, or any at all, really. Why he decides to go against the rest of the order, and that he would, prefer to be working for this demon god instead for this demon instead of his god, or the disciple of God in Saint Dumas. In books like this, you very often have a really obese nut job who has a lot of money and just wants more power, and that's what you have with this guy. Again, he's like Jason Wynn if he was worshiping the devil. So he murders his hench guy, and then Bruce Wayne, we cut back to Bruce and Alfred, and Bruce goes, "Hey, even though it's completely impractical and there's no way that I could have all this weight on me, I was actually wearing a bat suit, like a really bulky bat suit underneath everything when I was in this helicopter, like Superman, except I've got this big giant, 50-pound utility belt, so that was all in there." And so Alfred doesn't have to worry about him getting cold because he has like a heater things in his costume. And then there is an explosion, and there's a lot of those in this book, and Batman goes, "Oh man, I'm hearing a hovercraft." Now we get one of the more thrilling action sequences, and I enjoy these pages where there's not a whole lot of words. There is a decent amount of visual storytelling in this, and it's best handled in the action bits. We're in this transition period where comics are still very often pretty wordy, especially superhero comics, where there's a lot of, over explanations of things, but not as much in the action. So we tend to overcompensate in explaining character motivations, but we're starting to get a lot more cinematic in the action, where, like, Stan Lee would have written so many words all over this page, like telling you what Batman's doing. Like, now Batman is grabbing on the side of this hovercraft, trying not to fall off. We can just tell that looking at it. And so we're getting closer to the way we're going to be dealing with comic storytelling in the modern era, and more the way we do it now. with at least the action in a thing like this. And so Batman goes up against Azrael, who fights him just because he's told to by Nomaz, and again, he's got this, the conditioning that tells him that he's got to do whatever the Order wants him to do, basically, and he doesn't really know why he's fighting Batman, and Laha doesn't either, not Laha, excuse me, Nomaz. Nomaz basically says, go fight Batman because he looks like a demon, and so he's got to be a horrible person, go fight him, and we're going to find out that Nomaz thinks that everybody is evil, and the only people that aren't are like the 13 people who were in the Order of St. Dumas. And guess what? One of those is going to turn out to be the bad guy that started this whole mess in the first place. So we get this really kind of thrilling fight up on a hovercraft. It's fun, and Azrael's going to lose his sword in issue 2 out of 4. So less than the halfway point in a thing called Sword of Azrael, Azrael has no sword. And we're going to have this suit-up sequence here in a little bit where he's going to get replacements for his swords that are not swords. So I don't totally know why this is called Sword of Azrael, because he is, for the most part, not going to use a sword. He ends up fleeing the scene. Batman kind of bests him in this battle, or at least makes it to where he loses his sword. And then Laha is working on going off. So he has messed up his face and trying to make himself look more like the demon Biss. Characters like this will often have some kind of like messed up facial mutilation. I'm reminded of Chapel from Spawn as well. And then we have this kind of paralleling sequence where he's going to recreate himself as Biss, and Jean-Paul Valley is going to recreate himself as this new Azrael set apart from his father, and Laha is working toward going to murder the rest of the Order. And Azrael has these new kind of like wrist knives that come out and can become inflamed, and for whatever reason can be on fire a lot longer than that sword. That's what Nomaz says. I don't know why he has that technology, but he does. And that is going to pretty much get us to the end of this issue, I think. Oh yeah, you just got Laha being creepy in front of a mirror, talking about how he has the visage of Biss now. Naked, overweight people who do horrible, scary things is yet another trope of these kinds of villains from early 90s books. Oh, you know what? We're actually not at the end yet, because I forgot about this insanity. This is one of the most baffling comedic scenes I've read in a Batman comic. And when I say comedic, I don't think it's funny for the reason that Denny O'Neil meant it to be. I don't know what he was thinking when he wrote this. I like the art in this scene a lot. There's some really cool kind of shadow work and on the face with Batman, and a really expressive Batman face. We've got to deal with how we're going to eat. And Alfred says, well, I don't have a lot to work with, but I made you fajitas. I made you spinach fajitas. And Batman's like, oh, we're in Switzerland, so I thought you might use chocolate. Really? Like, I'm assuming Batman's sort of just making a joke. But it's a really awkward joke. Like, you're going to play that much into stereotypes? We're in Switzerland? So, like, are you also expecting that Alfred, like, immediately after he got out of the crashed helicopter, found like a Swiss Army knife in the snow? And are you expecting that there's like just like cheese trees? You can just pull cheese off because that's a thing that Switzerland's known for. Are you wondering why when you walked in here, you just into this cabin, it wasn't just lined with watches? Like what are you talking about, Batman? And then it gets even weirder, because then Alfred does like a Spock eyebrow raise after he takes a bite of the fajita, and at first he was like, chocolate fajita, that's barbarian, and he takes a bite of this and he goes, it's not very good. Maybe we could have used chocolate. It's a very strange page. We get Biss. I like to call him Bisquick. We get Laha now looking like Biss with his BFG, his big fat gun, and that's also a kind of a imagey early 90s trope. I say imagey. I mean, you had a lot of that at Marvel at the time as well. This looks like a thing right out of a Rob Liefeld comic. It's absurd. I don't know how it didn't come from space. Who built that thing? And he is ready to blow up everybody from the Order, so he's going to the reason he's here in Switzerland is because that's where one of the Order that he needs to kill is. So he goes to a hospital where that guy is, and then you get another page right out of Spawn. We saw this several times in the Spawn year, particularly whenever a major character was going to die, where whether you're in a hospital or not, you would get like lifelines, like from a breathing machine. And then you get a bunch of blood splattering when somebody has died. So this is just straight out of a Spawn comic. It was crazy to see this again. I feel like I'm right back in Spawn here. But at least I'm kind of enjoying the material. And then Bisquick shoots Azrael, but not in Azrael form, shoots Jean-Paul Valley, and then don't know what's going to happen. Luckily, we're at a hospital. You think, but that's actually not how he's going to get out of this. So now we get to book 3. I have got to get this finished so that I can get to the next hour. There's just so much material here to talk about. Wish I didn't have to do 4 at a time, but what are you going to do? I've got so many books I got to cover. So I guess I can still say thank God we're at a hospital, because at least there's an ambulance that comes to play. And Alfred is going to help out Jean-Paul Valley. Once again, we're going to get some nonlinear storytelling here in a minute, where we're going to go back and tell you what happened with Alfred around the ambulance. So Bruce Wayne decides to go into the hospital and try to take Laha head on, not as Batman, but as Bruce Wayne, he says, because nobody knows in Switzerland anything about Bruce Wayne, and this is not out of character for him. But I would rebut that, Bruce, by saying, what if this is a big enough incident that it becomes national news? Do you really want yourself on the news fighting a supervillain? So that seems like a mistake. I don't know why he's doing that. I think it would have been... because part of the explanation, too, is just he doesn't have time to change in his costume. Why doesn't he just say that? Why does he have to come up with some kind of a really flimsy justification for that? Long story short, Bruce is going to get hit with something that works a lot like scarecrow toxin, like fear gas, although it doesn't give him like a fear. It doesn't hit him specific to his own personal fears. It just kind of generically makes Laha look like a scary demon. And I guess it's got to be pharmaceuticals that do this to him, just so that we can have an image of a demon. And the demon that he's going to look like is going to be Malbolgia. Again, hard to imagine that this is not as McFarlane influenced as it looks. I do love Batman with a 2x4. That's pretty cool. And so he's going to fight Malbolgia with wings. It's like if you took Malbolgia and you combined him with Goldar. And then Laha is going to win this fight and is going to kidnap Bruce Wayne. So Alfred is trying to rescue Bruce, and he gets knocked up against the ambulance, and Laha makes it out with Bruce. And Nomaz is making it very difficult for anybody to help Bruce, because Azrael is not supposed to help anyone. That's not the point of him. He's just all about vengeance. So I'll take this opportunity to go ahead and break this down real quick. So what you have is kind of like 3 sides to the vengeance versus justice question. Right smack dab in the middle, you've got Batman, you've got Bruce Wayne, who is constantly in conflict about this. He sees himself as an agent of justice, or at least he'd like to be that, but there, of course, is a vengeance component because of what happened to his parents, and part of why he fights is because of course, he doesn't want any other kid to ever have to experience what he experienced, but also he's always lashing out at the world because of that. He wants to punish the evil as much as he wants to get justice for the people who are harmed by that. So he's right in the middle of that. And then on the other two ends, you have two guys who are straight up vengeance, but for different reasons. Bane is all about vengeance because of what the world did to him. So it's like if Bruce Wayne didn't care at all about justice. And with Azrael, it is, again, this mind-washing thing where he is all about a righteous vengeance. So in his mind, at least with his programming, it's supposed to be a punishment that is that is correct, a moral punishment. So that's kind of the three sides of those guys. So this is the part where Bisquick decides he's going to put on Batman's costume, and it just, in this panel, kind of looks like a t-shirt. I don't really know how that works because he looks twice as big as Batman, and he's got a big giant gut, and you'd think that, like, whatever material, and we'll see this in a minute, whatever material Bruce makes his costume out of is the most durable and the most stretchy of anything there is. So now Alfred is starting to appreciate Jean-Paul Valley more and more, and he's realizing that he's just a kid. He's kind of looking at him almost like a prospective Robin or something, and he's realizing that in his way, like with Bruce Wayne and even like with Bane, this all starts from a place of victimization. What has happened to him, this trauma, is not at all his fault, and there is a nature versus nurture thing happening here, just like there is with Bruce Wayne and with Bane. And the question again, Bane with this kind of identity question sits right in the, or excuse me, Batman with this identity question sits right in the middle. Is it his nature, or is it more of his nurture to not kill, to be compassionate, to try as hard as he can to make the world a better place? But of course, at the same time, just like with Bane and Azrael, he's also, and can't help it, interested in control, interested in making sure that the world can be exactly what he wants it to, because he hates that he was made to feel the way he was when he was young. But is that his nature, or is that because of his upbringing? And with Jean-Paul Valley, especially when we get to the end of this, it's going to be really clear that his nature is compassion. He is a very typical anti-establishment liberal from the 90s, and he looks like kind of a product of the hippie movement. He would really like to be a pacifist. He wants to help people. It is not in his nature to do violence, and with Bane, it is entirely in his nature to do violence, although there's maybe a question there too as to whether we should call that nature or nurture, because of course, if that trauma had not happened to him, he would have been just an innocent child. But still, for the sake of this comparison, it seems like, at least after the horrible thing that has happened to him, Bane's initial response to a lot of situations is do violence, try to take control. That is the opposite of what Azrael does, even, or at least Jean-Paul Valley, even after his father has been murdered. And so Alfred is seeing some potential in this kid, that he's got a good head on his shoulders, he cares about people, and he's showing some innate detective skills. Laha goes and kills another person from the Order, and nobody's there to stop him, of course, because he's got Bruce tied up. He is torturing Bruce for information, trying to get Bruce's fortune so that it makes it easier for him to do this, and it's going to turn out later that part of the reason he wants Bruce's fortune too is to get an oil rig started so that he can make a lot of money with oil. And so we've got constant arguing between Nomaz and Azrael about how exactly he's going to move forward, and Jean-Paul Valley just has no interest in what Azrael does with his conditioning, but of course whenever he turns into that, there's really nothing he can do about it. So creepiest panel in the miniseries, you've got Laha putting on the Batman mask and becoming, like I said, a total perversion of Batman. There's this question here when you look at Laha versus Azrael as to whether or not Batman is an angel or a demon. And whichever one he is, there is that vengeance component. So you have a demon of vengeance with Laha, you have an angel of vengeance with Azrael, and Batman is one of those, or is he a mixture of both? And at the end here, you get this really great panel where Azrael has finally taken his full-on form, and he's about to go to town and on some bad guys and do lots of murdering, and there's really nothing that Jean-Paul Valley can do about it. So getting into the fourth book now we get into "No one is innocent," which is Azrael's other catchphrase and the justification for killing anybody he feels like. So Azrael does not help people, and nobody is innocent, like the Kingpin said in the Daredevil movie, nobody. So he's gonna just rough up these guys and then do lots of stabbing. And Alfred's going to be absolutely horrified, and that's going to give us this identity question of where does Jean-Paul Valley begin and where does Azrael end? And the answer to that is going to be they are totally separate entities, which is also really interesting when you look at this triad. So you have Azrael, who is and as we go along into Knightfall, there's going to be more of a blend of these two characters. But right now, you have two totally separate entities between Azrael and Jean-Paul Valley. With Batman, you have one guy who pretends to be another guy. In his head, he's Batman. Bruce Wayne is just a mask that he wears. Bane has no extra identity whatsoever. He is just simply Bane. So we have these three very different types when it comes to identity. Two of them who have secret identities in their ways, and one who is exactly what you see is what you get, which is partly what makes him terrifying. So Nomaz is really excited that Azrael is being the vengeance angel, just killing everything in his path, and as we go along, he's going to finally refuse to do that by the end. Suddenly, as I said earlier, he has amnesia, and he didn't seem to have that before, but I guess now that he's full on Azrael, he has that. I don't think that's necessary for the story. I would have left that out entirely. It feels, once again, like a pointless comic book trope that's just there, maybe for the sake of drama, maybe for the sake of maybe just so that we don't have to draw these characters too much. And I think that's unfortunate. Jean-Paul Valley is more interesting than Al Simmons, and I do care about him more even while he has amnesia, but I just don't see the point of that. And at the end of this, he's going to get his personality right back, which is nice because it's going to take forever with Spawn and for no good reason. You know, I said that first smile was the creepiest panel. I think this one is actually even creepier. This is a Batman basically saying, I'm going to use my wealth for completely selfish reasons, while justifying it by saying that this is what my God wants. Just a complete and utter perversion of Batman. So Bruce tries to play this mind game with Lahan, and he says, isn't it wrong of you, in the eyes of your God, of your demon, to put on the outfit of another demon? And ultimately it backfires, it doesn't work. Laha ends up just torturing him some more, and then leaves for a while. And he's going to get rescued here in a little bit by Azrael, who goes against his conditioning in order to do that. I like the scene a lot. I like when Bruce says, well, I've been wrestling with this demon since I was 8 years old. And he basically says, my demon can beat up your demon. And again, this question of is Batman a demon or an angel comes up again. And that's a really great scene. I think it's the strongest writing in the book, and the whole thing culminates into a big confrontation at the end. With Laha, who is naked again, I guess, representing his dedication to his demon, or how much he wants to be that demon. He does take off the Batsuit because he decides that Bruce is right about that, and so Bruce gets really proactive, fights him off. I like that Bruce is still being Batman and isn't totally helpless in this scene, but ultimately he's not able to rescue himself. We've got Laha with his own flaming sword, or at least a sword that looks like it's on fire. I'm not actually sure if it is. And then Laha is going to do lots of shooting, and because of his mental conditioning and not just his outfit, Azrael is able to deal with the bullets. I don't buy that. I think that's weird comic book logic, but whatever. And then, again, Azrael is, after he's fought him, decides to rescue Bruce Wayne. Nomad says, no, you can't do that. That is not what Azrael is for. And Azrael says, yeah, I don't care. Screw you. And he rescues Bruce, leaves Laha to die. You get this great silhouette scene of the two of them jumping away. And then we wrap this up too quickly. I think we needed some kind of an epilogue scene. But because for some reason, after these events, suddenly Jean-Paul Valley knows who he is, and he says, my name is Jean-Paul Valley. That was my father's name too. He has kind of the Phantom thing where each Azrael has the same name. They pass it down just like the mantle, and he basically has said, I am deciding what Azrael is. I'm going to take this conditioning and I'm going to use it for good. Or at least he's going to try to do that, but he's going to wrestle with that nature-nurture thing as he becomes Batman later and can't help but kill people because that's what's built into him. There's this really interesting line toward the beginning where Nomad says that Azrael is Azrael by acting like Azrael. And I think that is another really interesting thing in comparison, in comparing each character in this triad. That's true of all of them. Each of them develops, even Azrael, who has a legacy mantle that was passed down, they build their own identities for these personas. So Bruce is Batman because he does what Batman does. He comes up with Batman, he defines Batman, and then he is Batman because he acts like Batman. Bane is Bane because he acts like Bane. It's kind of like that fake it till you make it thing. If you do the things that he does, you become him. The question with Azrael is Jean-Paul Valley really Azrael? Because that character, that mantle existed before him and was supposed to just be vengeance, just kill, and he does not do that now. So if he does something else and calls it Azrael, to him, that is Azrael. So anyway, I have got to get to my third reading. I'm gonna have to really rush that to the next hour. This took too long. This is ultimately really good material. I don't think it's as good as Vengeance of Bane. Some of the writing is really clunky. I don't like the way the exposition is handled, but I really enjoyed it, and it sets a wonderful foundation for these characters and getting into Knightfall. Man, I just gotta say, Spawn, you're out, man. I'm so done with you. Like in one miniseries, I just read what felt like your comics done like 100 times better, and almost like everything your books were trying to accomplish, this manages, at least character-wise, and it has some of the same silly tropes, but is actually pretty good. So That's it, Spawn. Just go away. No more Spawn. Spawn no more. Okay. On to hour 3. Whew.